fashionably late to this. Have you
Hmm.
heard of the cursor? It's a VS Code but derivative called cursor.
I have not.
You should look into this.
Okay. So it's a derivative.
Yeah, like
Uh,
it's a fork of
Yeah.
because right, VS Code is open source, and
Yep.
so it's called cursor,
Okay.
and it has Paul. This is going to be shocking. It has AI built in.
Okay.
Now, you could probably do all this with a couple different windows open of like ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot and everything else. But like many things in life, they just have a better UI and better experience. And I downloaded it yesterday. And I was like, you know
Hmm.
what? I make a hobby out of making terrible Python scripts. That's kind of my favorite thing to do. And
Yeah.
so within about like 35 minutes, I went from a blank slate to having a fully functional Tetris game that was
Yeah.
Harry Potter themed that I could then give to my daughter.
What was it written in? Do you know? Does it matter?
It was that one was written in Python, so
Yeah. Okay.
it's really really good for that.
Now, what brought this on? Like, so what happened that made you either find this or look, or what was the impetus
So
for
Paul, have you
this?
ever noticed that I just like to tinker with things?
Oh yeah. I call it, actually the technical term for that is dicking around.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
Um,
That is what it is. That's actually what the D in PhD stands for.
yes.
Is
Yeah.
I don't
I
know
mean,
what
I
the
just, I,
anyways. So I was like, hey,
sorry.
well, because I have a couple Python scripts. We've got a product release next week for Stardock, which spoiler alert, there won't be a podcast probably Monday through Wednesday of next week because I got to go back up to the office.
Mhm.
And there's certain things we have to do with images and whatever else. And I have a couple Python scripts that will take content that we have and get it into the format that we need for websites and whatever else. And so I
Yep.
was like, yeah, I could edit these. And so how do I want to do that? I
Or,
was like, I downloaded the cursor
yeah.
and
Right. Oh, shit. Okay. So I've never heard of this. Coincidentally, this week, not for the very first time, but maybe for the second or third time at most, I loaded a local. No, no, no. Actually, I think this was the first time for local, but I used Visual Studio Code to access an LLM.
mm-hmm.
But this one was a local LLM running on a Snapdragon, X
Yeah.
PC, whatever. Microsoft announced the latest distilled versions of DeepSeek that
Mm-hmm.
run locally. I think the one I got was 14 billion parameters. And I used it to, for some of the programming type questions I've been using GitHub Copilot and other AIs for lately, just to kind of judge the way it worked. So it's a reasoning model, but it's running off the MPU, right? It's interesting because it runs really slow. And this is a weird comparison, but 35 years ago ish, I ran Windows 3 or 3.1, like whatever was probably 3, I guess, on my wife's IBM PS1 computer, which was a 286 with
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous specs, like by stupidly ridiculously bad, including the screen, which was like like 4 grades of gray. So it was like black, white, and 2 shades of gray or something. And when you did that, you could watch the menu, like you'd click on a menu, you could watch it draw, and then it would draw the lines, then it would draw on each word, and then you could click on it. And that's a little bit what it was like because, anyone who's used a chatbot has seen that experience, but it would do the reasoning thing where it spells out what it's doing very slowly. Like just the outputting of text was slow. But it worked. I mean, it worked really well. And Visual Studio Code is a little technical for a lot of people. It's,
Mm-hmm.
the programming editor or whatever, but that chat interface is sadly, weirdly become common, right? So you use something like this.
Yep.
And how specific was your prompt, or how did you do this?
So it's all within the interface. That's kind of
Oh,
the big
that's the thing. I
that's the
see.
big thing is that there's just a chat panel off. Well, there's a couple different ways you can interact with it. First off, it also uses Claude. Doesn't use. I think you can connect it to GPT, but whatever. Claude is very good
Yeah.
with programming, especially their 3.7. I think default
Yep.
out of the box it gives you 3.5, and
Gotcha.
so it's just a chat panel on the right side, and you're just sitting there having a conversation about the code that is just in the editor to the left,
I
and
got you.
it's not perfect. So, as an example, when I said, "Hey, make Tetris," the first problem that I had was that the pieces just fell through the bottom of the floor. So, like it had things, and
Yeah.
then it changed the color of the pieces to the background, so there were just no pieces on the you couldn't see them, and so
Yeah.
it took the
But
D
you
and
were,
PhD
but you
for
were,
an
you
hour.
never coded. You were just discussing this
Yeah,
with
I
it,
know, I
essentially.
didn't write a single line of code.
Yep.
I did alter a couple things by hand because I know Python enough that
Okay.
it never actually solved the floor problem. And I was like, okay, this is clearly just a
Yeah, like a,
positioning or the grid.
yeah, what a
The
boundary.
visual overlay on the
Yeah.
grid was off, and so I found the two parameters, and one was a 15 and one was a 30. And magically enough, when I made them both 15 for the height, it
It
fixed my
that
problem.
did it. Yeah. Huh. Okay.
So you can't be completely, it's not to the point where it's like, hey, write me an RSS reader and have it connect all my favorite service. Like, we're not there yet.
Yeah, but
But
you know what? But you can see it, right? I think that's the point.
well, the other thing too that I think is interesting is for people who, I mean, I have some coding in my background, but not, I would not consider myself a developer.
Yeah.
It's infinitely more approachable when you can get something to a point where there's problems versus just trying to get to a point where you can see something. Because, like, once the game was up and quote unquote running, even though the rules were not being followed or whatever else, you can get, you got to get into the very specific ways of telling the models how it's broken. You can't just say the pieces fall through the floor because while that works for in our
Yeah.
context, it was very clear the model did not understand what that actually meant, and
Yep.
so you got to really formulate your questions more specifically, and having any sort of technical background helps there. But, like, again, give it a
It's
couple
only a matter of
years.
time, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even a couple of years, dude. That's the thing. It won't be that long. Um, that's interesting. I honestly, I think two of the more confusing aspects of this today are model pickers, where you're just as a person using a chatbot, and like you have these choices. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was OpenAI or it doesn't matter, but one of them kind of listed up five of them. They're like, use this for you. You know, it's like, guys, this is something you should be doing for me. I don't make me pick that. That's stupid. But the other one is just how knowing what's best for what when, because like
Mm-hmm.
today, like you said, Anthropic is awesome for a program. They're all good at it, but let's just pretend or assume that one is the best. 2 weeks from now, that might not be the case, and keeping up with that right now is really tricky because these things change so fast.
Yeah. One of the things, and I got to ask you a question,
Mm-hmm.
is your notepad on GitHub that you've been writing your clone?
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Yeah, because I would be curious to see. Well, first thing I want to do is like ingest that in there, be like, how did Paul screw this up, and then just see what.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah. So the version that's on GitHub is the one I completed last year at the end
Yeah.
of the year. Since then, I've been working on, like, I'm adding tabs to it. That's very complex, right? So one of the things I would do, regardless of AI, is like trying to improve the code quality, right? So I found bugs in the original one, last year's one, in the new version. So I've actually had to reload the original and go back and fix it. Like, there was a bug with, like, I use a timer to do autosave,
Mm-hmm.
but the timer was enabled regardless of whether autosave was enabled, and you could get in. Like, one time I left the app sitting there. I think I went to lunch or something. I came back and they were like, I'm just gonna make up a number, I don't know, 27 autosave. Like, do you want to
Oh
autosave?
yeah.
Like, they had kind of cascaded. Obviously, not the way it's supposed to work. So I think I fixed that. But yeah, I want to do an AI code quality thing, right? I'm trying to figure out how the best way to do that, but that's another thing that kind of evolves. So, you can kind of imagine I have all these methods. It's modular, but it doesn't use like an MVVM, whatever you call it, design pattern or anything like that. Like, I'm not like you, I'm not a programmer, but I want to go like method by method sort of, and say, like,
Mm-hmm.
how would you improve this or whatever, or like, could you make this more efficient, or maybe there's a bug in there I don't know about, or whatever. Like, I'm trying to like, I need some sort of it's probably already there, right? I just don't know how to use the tools, but it's basically here's the code, how would you make this better, kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, for this version, and actually for the last version too, I'd like to just, yeah, improve it, right?
Yeah.
I want it to be reasonably good code. Like, I don't know how to do WPF, like, data binding at all. Like, I don't know. The examples are always very simple. It's like, you type text over here and it updates over here too. It's automatic. It's like, that's cute. They're not arrays, but I'll call them. I have arrays of complex classes that have multiple properties, each of which applies to a tab, right?
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of document state. Yeah, how do I bind that? Is there a book out there that tells me about? No, there is not. Nobody talks about those complex cases. So, yeah, could AI help with this? I don't know, maybe.
The
I'm trying.
downfall will be is AI is always trained on what is known and readily available. So,
No, yeah, well, for sure. But I mean, but even just I don't know if you had documentate whatever the official documentation was. You could pick five of the best books ever written. WPF has not changed a lot in
mm-hmm.
20 years. The nice thing about it is it's been around for a long time, so it was a big source of like Stack Overflow questions for a million years. So that it's probably out there, honestly. Like, I mean, even if no one has tackled this problem, it's just covered by the language spec, right, or the framework spec, or whatever it is. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know, man. This is the irony, maybe the hypocrisy of my existence right now. Like, I am trying to get people to open up to using these things, using AI, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever work they do. I talked to a guy yesterday from Mexico who's a writer, like a fiction writer, and I asked him about this. He's like, "Oh no, I don't want to." Yeah, and I said, "Well, hold on a second. So I'm literally not telling you to use it to write, but think about all the stuff you do around writing. We were talking about Stephen King. I'm like, you want to set a short story in a town somewhere. You want to research the place, like find out there's some local thing going on that you don't know anything about that could be a fun little bit of color for a story you're writing. Don't shut down to it. But in my own work, like I wrote two premium posts over the weekend, both of which were rather lengthy. One was I think the Mark Razinovich Rust thing, and the other one was about Skype, right? And the Skype one was 5,000-6,000 words, big. And of course, I'm like, all right, I'm going to use AI. I'm going to use it to find out all this information and get it all in the right order and everything. And then I just ended up writing it like I always do. Like I struggle to use it myself, you know. So this is the struggle is real. I don't know. Like
Yeah. Well,
I
it's saying just go use AI for things. It's very hand wavy because you got to have a scenario. You got to have a thing that is structured correctly. Because as an
yep.
example, like go make me dinner. Like go give me a dinner
Go
list.
make
Like
me
that doesn't
dinner.
work for
You're like, I
99%.
don't like Brussels sprouts.
Right. Especially it's exam.
Sorry, a little too familiar. I'm sorry. I don't know why. I'm just going to keep mentioning Brussels sprouts now. Yep. No, I know, and that's why very early on, before we really had this to even work with, I used to use the PowerPoint presentation example,
Oh,
right?
the designer
But
is real good.
yeah, but you early on had something, and I think it was related to Python. It was something you had to do for work, and it was just like a real world thing. And like I apologize, I can't remember the exact story, but my wife recently used it for some work related stuff, not to write, but to summarize a set of interviews with different people,
Mm-hmm.
and then to ask AI to go back. They made like health claims, right? To go back and say, all right, I need to find sources from within the past 5 years that are credible, that can be cited, that I can verify. They either prove or disprove whatever claim. And then it would spit this thing out with citations, and she'd go and check and say yes or no, or whatever, right? So there's still work involved, but that saved her some time, because otherwise she would do that herself. Just like I would Google something and end up at Stack Overflow literally every single time. You could use GitHub Copilot and ask it the question; it would just spit it out, right? Anyway, it's a hurdle, I think,
Yep.
for
I'm
I
really
think for
waiting
most
for
people, right?
the one thing that I'm probably most interested in right now. I think the reference you were talking to is actually related to what one of the scripts I used probably yesterday, which takes
Yeah, I
takes
think
a
so.
folder of images and crops the corners rounded to 4%. And
Nice.
so
Okay.
that way you just point it out and there's
Mm-hmm.
like 60 images in there. It just runs it through and then kicks out in a folder in an organized fashion, which is just a Python script. Yeah, you can make Photoshop, whatever, but this is just a script. You don't have to
But
do
it
anything
automate.
prior.
Yeah, yeah. No, you could, but I mean, you could, but are you? I mean, that this is why that's such a great example. You have a job, and your job, it pertains to whatever you have, like whatever responsibilities, and cropping photos with rounded corners is not really in your job description, but it's something you have to do for these announcements, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, every so often, whatever the time frame is. But it's not how you spend your life. It's not how you spend your day. Like, you're not getting paid to do that
Right.
exactly per se. It's something that takes time. Why wouldn't you automate that? It's not a core competency for you. You're like, it's something I just got to get this job done. I don't
Yeah.
care how I do it. I just want it to be right at the end. And that's a perfect example, you know?
The thing I'm waiting for though is Search GPT to get better. To use your wife's example, like something that would, I don't think you can do this today, but it would be go find 5 sources that reference the Cleveland Clinic that are linked to a written and published and reviewed document, right? Because we all know that AI
Yeah,
can just generate vomit, but having that sort of
that's right.
contextual level to where the agent
So
goes out and crawls specifically for you rather than the index.
the yeah, so the thing I said earlier about I think it was Gemini, but it doesn't matter. Whatever AI, you get this list of choices of models, and then it tells you which each one is good at, and you're like, what? Like, come on, man. Just here's an idea. I'll ask you a question. You use the right one. That is a very simplistic, but uh, an example of like what I would call an orchestrator. It's what the OS should be doing for you. Which
Yep.
if it should be routing AI tasks or whatever to the NPU, GPU, CPU, whatever you have, right? It should do that for you automatically. The thing you just described is another form of that when you think about it, which is you shouldn't have to be so specific. It should know, like you should be able to go in and say, look, I'm doing this, I'm writing about whatever this topic is. I only accept information from these high quality, government approved or whatever it is, sources, research based, actually, real, not nonsense. And then just give me those answers with citations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But only use those. Don't use Wikipedia. Don't use Bob's website. Use the American Association of whatever it is of Medicaid, whatever, like whatever that high quality source is. So I think these are all forms of orchestration. And I think it just speaks to the immaturity of AI right now that we don't have that yet. So we're
Yeah.
having to do these manual things right now.
Well, because one of the primary problems, and this is where Google and Microsoft, for that matter, have a big leg up. The index of the internet is substantial
That's
and
right.
a point of leverage that you can't just materialize out of nowhere.
This is why I always thought for all of Google's initial issues, I guess, stumbling
Mm-hmm.
when it was still barred, remember, and they kept face raking all over the place. It's like, guys, they're Google. I mean, you said Google and Microsoft. That was in a way polite because I would say Bing's. I'm not sure that Bing's contribution to Copilot isn't a negative, frankly, but fair enough. I mean, you need this body of whatever knowledge, right? So this is where Google has an advantage. Plus, they've been doing this AI stuff internally forever. They just
Mm-hmm.
hadn't productized it because they were worried about killing their business.
Well, how's that
I
working out for them?
well,
They're still
I
around.
think
They're all right.
they've course corrected nicely. I
Mm-hmm.
honestly, we're going to reach a rough parity with all of these things if we haven't already, right? So, if you're using cloud or whatever, and I'm using chat or Copilot, well, not Copilot, that one's going to be stupid, but Chat GPT, Gemini, whatever, these things are all going to, you know what I mean? They're all going to work. Like even the Amazon stuff, like people will be using it on like some
Yep.
Alexa thing that they bought at Walmart or something. It's going to work fine. Like maybe not on day one, maybe there'll be little things, but whatever. Like over time, I think it's all going to be good.
Yeah, but not Siri. Siri's pretty bad.
No, that's not, come on. It's ridiculous.